Okay, I'm pretty sure it's recording. So I am super excited to get the chance to introduce Dr. Josh Klapow, a clinical psychologist I've known over a decade now. Like, we have known each other for a long time. Behavioral scientist, performance coach extraordinaire. I have to derail a little bit from your talk here, or your little bio, because I can honestly say, had it not been for you, I'm not sure I would have graduated from graduate school. And yes, I got an A in your class, but obviously people who know me would not be surprised by that. But you just offered mentorship and friendship, not only expertise and skills to help me find my way, but I can genuinely say it is because of you. You were one of the people who supported me and believed in me when I was in such a dark time. And I love that burnout was probably playing a role. Let's be real, it was graduate school. But that's why I'm so excited to get to share and introduce you in this time as well. So spent 17 years at UAB from School of Public Health. You are still adjunct there. Yes, okay. And then in 2008, I love this because you co-founded a technology company here in Birmingham, and Chip Rewards, where you serve as the chief behavioral scientist. He has consulted with companies across the nation and globally in the areas of productivity, engagement, and retention. You guys can come in. Come on. Talent development and organizational design. So look, I don't think I can sing your praises enough, but it is because I literally have a PhD and another master's that I have to thank you for. Author of over 100 publications in the area of health promotion and behavioral medicine. And yes, he was on my dissertation committee and again, helped me secure my degrees and put me on the path to where I am now here at SHIP. So without further ado, I absolutely get the privilege and honor of introducing Dr. Josh Klapow.
That was awesome. I don't think I've ever had an introduction like that. That was fantastic. Yeah, so Lindsay really represents something that I think a lot of us experience in our career, and particularly in the area of tech. But I happened to see it in graduate school when she was in graduate school, and frankly, was experiencing it myself as a faculty member. And one of the things I'm going to talk about today, let me say this. There's a lot that I'm going to talk about today that you already know or you've heard, but I want you to hear it again, and I want you to hopefully hear it in a slightly different way, because this thing that we call stress and burnout is so insidious, and yet it's so prevalent that I think a lot of times we just ignore it. And to Lindsay's point, if you're ever a founder, if you're ever in an executive position, if you ever in graduate school, if you're ever faculty, if you are a person living, you're going to experience stress, and you do not want it to take you down. And so that's kind of the focus of my talk is, what do we need to do for ourselves and others so that we don't let this take us apart, take our companies apart, take our coworkers apart. Before that, there is nothing that can be said that doesn't sound trite when I talk about what has happened in Texas. We're all talking about it. This is one of those things where you say, I don't know what I should say. I don't know should we talk about? Yes, we should talk about it. It is a horrific stressor. It is a horrific trauma, and it is a backdrop for us and everything that we're doing right now as employees, as executives, as parents, and as people. And one of the things that we'll get into just a little bit, as you see, you can't separate this stuff. You shouldn't try to separate this stuff. Instead, what you have to be able to do is attack the impact of it and be able to manage it. And that's what's happening right now in Texas, what's happening for all of us as we watch these events unfold. So let me do this. I apologize. I have a technology curse. So I'm going to try. Look at that. So I sort of already said it. This is one of the hard things about being a clinical psychologist. If you are a clinical psychologist and you are talking about stress, then everybody does the face plant, head plant. It's like, oh my God, he's going to talk about stress management. We've had 17 different lectures on it. Every consultant has come in. Yes, I am. I'm going to talk about it because it is not only our bread and butter as psychologists. I can tell you in essentially any company, every company I've ever worked with, the absolute common denominator, you can talk about communication and culture and all that, single common denominator, and that is people and the experience of stress and how well individuals and organizations manage it. Manage it well, you do well. Manage it poorly, and it'll take you out. And that's why we have to talk about it. So let me go next slide. You may be familiar with this. I was not until about almost two years ago. And I want you to stop and think about this for just a second. When there's an ICD classification for burnout as an occupational phenomenon, it's not a diagnosis, but it literally is part of ICD, or ICD-11, that it is a occupational phenomenon. That's like, think about that. That's like an injury. That is like something that has made it into the books. What that tells me is, as much as we talk about stress and burnout, and as much as there's research on it and everything, it is a thing. It is a thing at a global level. And that's something that we did not have before 2019. Not that we didn't have stress and burnout, but it has gotten so bad that we're now making it something that it's on its way almost to a diagnosis, or at very least an occupational hazard. And that's terrible, and yet very often good, because it brings it to our attention. This is really important for today. Sadly, I do this talk when tragedies have not happened. I don't typically do this talk when a tragedy has happened, but I want to be 100% crystal clear. If you do one thing as you're trying to understand stress, stressors, crises, those kinds of things, absolutely, it's in the eye of the beholder. I cannot tell you what is a crisis and what is not for you. You cannot tell me that. I can't tell you what is a stressor. You can't tell me what is a stressor for me and for you. It comes from the person's perspective. And the worst thing we can do, particularly if we're in leadership positions, is to try to convince people that what they're experiencing isn't that bad. Okay. The other thing is that a stressor is also relative. You know, before yesterday, I would have come on and said, look, a stressor is a company reorg, or a relationship difficulty, or the loss of a loved one, or a pet. Any one of those is a stressor, or daily hassles, or too many multitasking things. What we have in Texas is a traumatic stressor that is affecting everybody in different ways. But that doesn't mean that the daily hassles aren't there and that they don't have a significant impact. In fact, most of the time, we're lucky that they aren't things like the Texas shooting. COVID is another thing that I'm talking a lot about, that we're all talking a lot about. There's one interesting psychological part to COVID, though. There's a gazillion fascinating psychological phenomena that have happened with the pandemic. I will not get into those. But man, Lindsay, I don't know if I told you, Lindsay, if I was just starting my career in academics as a psychologist now doing research, I mean, there is so much to research about the sort of psychosocial implications of COVID. But I will tell you one thing, from a stress and burnout standpoint, COVID is so unique because the pandemic keeps rolling on. And while things have gotten better, while we believe that things are opening up, they have opened up. When we talk about the impact of COVID in terms of stress, not only the physical health part and the impact on the workforce, but the fact that things close down and then open back up. The fact that we're talking about hybrid working, the fact that we're talking about logistics and distribution issues. All of those things are related to COVID. And even if you take the illness part of it away, and I'm not advocating that you do, you still have disruption in our daily lives as a direct result of that. And that is something, again, if you are in a leadership position, do not let your guard down for yourself or others, because COVID itself, while infection rates may be going down, people are recovering, people are feeling better, the impact of it in terms of stress is absolutely present. I cannot tell you how many calls I am on around consulting around hybrid working and who should be in and who should be out and when they should be in and when they should be out. That is a thing. And so again, another example of something that maybe is sitting a little bit more in the background now, but it's still very much a global stressor. This is my favorite thing. I have always said this. When I die and I come back, and I hope that I do, I actually don't want to come back as an Irish setter because they're not real bright as dogs, but I do want to come back as a Labrador retriever because as you can see in this slide, much like Irish setters, Labrador retrievers are pretty much happy and hungry and tired and playful and not much else. And I think ideally, if we could do that, we would have it would be great for us. But the reality is that we're not Irish setters. And if we think that we are, if we try to kid ourselves that all is okay when it is not, as I said, stress will take you out. And so it's really important that we do what we can to understand what's going on, understand the nuances of the stress in ourselves and others, and understand how to manage it in a super practical way. And that's what I'm going to talk about as well. One thing that a lot of times happens for somebody like me, that when a psychologist, particularly when someone with a health background comes in, a lot of folks will say, well, yes, I know it leads to heart disease and it leads to diabetes and it leads to, depression and whatnot. And particularly for younger folks, they're like, that's all great, but I'm fine. I'm good. I don't have heart disease or diabetes, and I'm not depressed. And that is true. So I want to focus just for a second on what we call the acute effects of stress. And think about this. Imagine if you came to work, or somebody you knew came into work with the following. Any or all of these, okay? Everything from muscle aches to skin problems, muscle tension, upset stomach, all of that stuff. Urinary incontinence, low libido, erectile dysfunction, decreased muscle and strength, all of that. Imagine somebody coming into work with not necessarily all of those, let's just say 4 or 5 of those, okay? But there's more. There's so much more than just that. Oh, I forgot the UTI, sorry about the UTI. Imagine if you had all those physical things, and in addition, you're easily distracted, you're irritable, you're not as productive, you're making problems, you can't remember anything, okay? This is the fascinating part of where sort of workplace, occupational health meets medicine, meets psychology, meets corporate culture. What's our differential diagnosis here? Now, on the one hand, you could be flipping really sick, like you need to go to the emergency room. You need to be seen by a medical professional immediately because you could have everything from a heart attack, having a heart attack to a stroke to COVID. And I'll just give you an example. When I used to do a lot of, if you're old enough to remember the pandemic flu that was going to take us all out, we used to do training for it. And one of the biggest fears among public health experts was that people would become quite distressed about getting the flu, much like COVID, and it would produce symptoms that mimicked influenza. We're seeing the same thing with COVID. It's not that you have COVID and it's not that you are stressed or not stressed, et cetera, but the physical manifestations of stress are absolutely in the moment. Everything that I just showed you is not 5 years down the line. You can come in with those kinds of symptoms. And if it's not attributable to some other illness, you do need to entertain the possibility that you or a colleague or an employee are experiencing the absolute acute effects of stress. And again, without going back to the slide, Imagine the impact of that. And you can just pick a few of those. You are going to be so off of your game, even if you're not experiencing all of them. Now, if you don't do anything about that, right? And you just say, I don't know, suck it up, deny it. It's not an issue. We don't have to worry about it. That's when you start getting to burnout. And I can't see folks, but I'm going to ask you to do this. This is criteria for what we call the Burnout Club. It's this amazing club that lots of people are members of, but there are specific criteria to get into the club. So I'm going to read these super quick to see if you are a candidate for membership into this elite club called the Burnout Club. Number 1, be a perfectionist, never accept excellence, never exercise, be a pessimist. Remember, the glass is always half empty. Accept responsibility for everything and everyone all the time. This is my favorite one. Engage in an endless process of controlling everyone and everything, especially those people and things that you actually have no control over. Strive to sleep as little as possible. Who needs sleep? Never desire to take time for yourself. If you're forced to do so, feel super guilty. And then be on a routine, a very important routine where you sleep until you're hungry, eat until you're tired, use alcohol to relax, and stimulants to get going. Now, again, this is because I'm a psychologist, you don't have to raise your hand, you don't have to let me know, and you can consider this even for a friend. How many of you quietly know somebody who are members or could be members of this club? And I'm going to say you only need 4 to 5 of those for criteria. I bet a lot of people, a lot of us. And the reason that that's important is if you look at those criteria, that's the way a lot of us operate. We just operate that way. And in a discrete moment, it's not that big of a deal. Okay, I'm a perfectionist. Who cares? Okay, I tend to be a little bit of a pessimist. Who cares? Well, over time, it becomes toxic. This is an interesting, the reason I put these up here, you know, I work with folks across sort of an age span from about 22 to 70. And depending on where you are in your lifespan, some of these become more or less important. The heart diseases and the cancers and the dementias and those kinds of things. But across the board, across the age cohort, things like anxiety, depression, autoimmune disorders, substance use, infertility, those kinds of things impact everybody. And the thing that I think we have a tendency to believe is it's going to be down the road. Well, down the road could be a few months from the time that you start sort of experiencing these stressors, or the time they start becoming worse and worse. So the fact that you can develop an autoimmune disorder, that you can develop anxiety, depression, heart disease, cancer, because of something that you actually can manage is, again, it's something that is sad because we have control over it. And if you're thinking about it from a technology or a company standpoint, organizational standpoint, it can be literally taking your workforce out and you're not even paying attention to it because you're thinking about other things like COVID and psychiatric disorders and, you know, productivity, etc. This is one of those really important reminder slides that every one of us, psychologists included, by the way, I don't know if you're interested or not. So I'm a psychologist. My wife is a psychologist. My son is in graduate school and is debating becoming a psychologist. And my daughter is a rising senior in college. And as we found out last year, changed her major to psychology. So there is quite the potential for 4 psychologists in the Klapow family. The reason I'm putting in this slide up is I forget this all the time. It doesn't matter if you're a psychologist. One of the most important things to remember is our interpretation of what's going on around us is what determines how we react. Now, again, I know we know that, but we forget that. We always say, this is stressing me out. It is not stressing you out. You are experiencing it, and you're making a determination in your head, a thought or an interpretation, which is then resulting in your stress response. That sounds like I'm putting the blame on you. I am, because it is both your fault, my fault, and our responsibility, and we have our control. We have control over it. So it's not so much that we are trying to get after things not to stress us out, but what we're trying to do is, if you sort of look at this alarm reaction coping response, we're going to get stressed out. We're going to make appraisals that put us in sort of this fight or flight mode. It's really, for me, what are we doing to turn that off, to bring that back down? If we do nothing, you go exhaustion, burnout. If you actively work at it, you are able to thrive. And what you're going to see when I start talking about how to manage it is got nothing about, reading 17 books and meditating for an hour every day. If you do that, that's great. But it's a much different approach than I think a lot of times we're presented. This is a side note. Self-care, which we're here, it's now become, it's a thing, right? It's always been a thing, but now it's like a thing that has its own, everybody talks about self-care. It is not a spa day, but I am a huge proponent of spa days. Love me a good spa day, but self-care is one of those ones where it's already taking on as a term, sort of a connotation of fluff. Self-care means you are managing your health, your well-being, and the way you interact in the world. And if you think about it and you don't call it self-care, that's what you should be freaking doing every single day for yourself and everybody else around you. So even though self-care and mental health days and personal time off and all these things, which are really important, are sort of taking on a little bit of a negative feel, we should all be doing self-care every day, all day long, because self-care makes us better at what we're doing in the moment and down the road. So, actually, Lindsay can appreciate this. Let me see what time. So I used to do psychological first aid training for first responders. They would do it all over the state. We'd go, actually all over the Southeast. And one time I was doing a program and I was about to start my talk. And a woman came up to me. I'm about 5'11", 6 feet. She was about 5'3". And she got all up in my personal space and it was super awkward. And she looked at me before this talk I was giving and she's like, I just have one question for you. And literally that's what she started with, is for a talk. And I, sure, what is it? I'm going to take this course, or they told me I have to take this psychological first aid seminar from you. Are you going to make me read 3 books afterwards? Or a manual that's 500 pages long on how to manage my stress? And I was like, no. And I happened to glance down because she was shorter than me. And I looked and she actually had a gun on her. There was a lot of first responders there, law enforcement, but she happened to have a gun, but she wasn't in uniform. So now I'm having an alarm reaction because there is a woman who's very upset. I don't exactly understand why, other than she thinks I'm going to give her reading assignments and she has a gun. And so I asked her, Lindsay, you'll see the tie-in in a minute. I asked her, no, I'm not going to give you all that. What is your concern? And then she leaned in again and she said, look, I'm a homicide detective. I've got 300 unresolved cases. I have to figure out who killed whom and let loved ones know. And they're telling me I need to just relax. I don't have, and she said, effing time to relax. And I sure as hell don't have time to read a bunch of books about relaxation. Can you do it in less than a 500-page manual? And I smiled because it was the very thing that I hear all the time and that I think people have such a misunderstanding about. You want to manage stress? Recognize that you're having symptoms of stress. Okay, and I already went through the list. And so basically check off in your head, am I having these things, and are these things due to some other illness? Number 2, ask yourself, where might they be coming from? And don't just say, I don't know. Say, look, I feel a little bit off. My stomach hurts, my head hurts, I can't concentrate, etc. I don't know what's going on. I don't think I'm ill. Where might they be coming from? I got a lot going on at work. I got stuff going on at home. And then number 3, change the situation, change your thoughts, or change your physiological response. So change the situation. I'm having problems at work because I can't focus and I can't concentrate. Maybe you need to go hybrid. Maybe you need to go home and work from home for a day. Maybe you need to change jobs. Maybe you need to delegate to your employees. Physically change the situation and your stress may go down. Number two, which is really hard, is change your thoughts about the situation. I'm a complete stressed out mess. Nobody understands what I need to do. If I don't do this right, it's never going to get done. Maybe it's time for you to step back and say, what happens if I don't do this right? Answer the what if questions. So spend some time thinking about, why do I feel this way? And how can I think about it differently? And then the last thing, which I am a huge proponent of, change your physiological response to stress. And I'm going to say this here. We all know this. If you've had it in a college class, if you had it in high school, if you were ever an athlete, if you watch TV, you know that when we're stressed, our muscle tension increases, our respiration rate decreases, we take shorter breaths, our blood pressure goes up, we got lots of gastric juices going and cortisol running throughout our bodies, but it's a very acute physiological thing that we literally can control in the moment. It's hard to change your situation sometimes. It's hard sometimes to change your thoughts. It is not hard to get a grip on your physiological response. So I want you to try something. Actually, this works really well. I don't know if any of you all are in the same room. I've had to modify this for big groups because of COVID, but I want you to try something. I am not about to hypnotize anybody virtually. Nobody's going to walk around. No subliminal plants, nothing like that. I am licensed though, so I guess it's okay. And this is voluntary. You don't have to do this. But what I'm going to ask you to do, if you like, is in a minute, I'm going to ask you to put your feet on the floor, put your hands on your lap, and you can either keep your eyes open or closed. And then I'm going to ask you on my count to take a deep breath in, hold it, and then breathe it out, and just follow my lead on it. Okay. All right. So get your feet on the floor, hands on your lap, nice and comfortable, and take a deep breath in, inhale all the way and hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now exhale all the way. Exhale all your air out. Let your shoulders roll. Let your head drop. And now notice, just in the second, how do you feel? It's fleeting. It's going to go away. But I'm guessing you feel just slightly tiny better. Just a little bit better. It's happening because I've made you uncomfortable physiologically. You may have already had that stress there. And that one breath regulated you just a little bit. Now, again, it's one breath. So I don't expect it to last for the whole day. I don't even expect it to last past what I said. But imagine this idea that you can regulate your stress response simply by breathing slower and more controlled. Every athlete is taught to do this. Every single athlete. If you're a basketball fan, which I am, watch anybody who's about to go take a free throw and you see them do the same thing. Dribble, 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 and they go like this. They're regulating their breath. They're controlling their muscle tension. That's all that it is. And as silly as that one breath is, it sometimes can mean the difference between you being offline or on your game. Here's the difference. And this is not so much that I come up with this, but this is where I choose to place my emphasis when I'm talking about stress and burnout. There are a lot of intensive things that we can do from a preventive standpoint and from a recovery standpoint. The exercise, the guided imagery, the relaxation, the yoga, the meditation, the prayer, nature bathing, all these kinds of things that we can and should incorporate into our daily lives will help us manage stress. But if you're sitting there thinking about that for yourself or your employees, and you're like, okay, I don't have time for that, or that's not what we do, or they're on their own, think about the way your day goes. For most of us, our day goes like this. We get up, and hopefully we're not stressed out messes when we get up. But even if we are, we try to bring ourselves back to center. We focus, we start working, and over the course of the day, we're pulled off track. We're pulled off track with distractions. We're pulled off track with stress. And for most of us, we kind of hang on as much and as long as we can until we either can't do anything more, are absolutely exhausted, the day has ended, or we go and have cocktails. And the problem with that is if you go with that approach, your stress levels have built so much that about 3 hours into your day, you're less effective than you really should be. So this idea of recalibration is super simple. Every 60 to 90 minutes, and you can play around with it, every 60 to 90 minutes, take 1 to 3 minutes. 1 to 3 minutes. And I say one, even one, to just reset your breath, take a couple deep breaths, reset your mind. What am I doing? Why am I supposed to be on the Zoom call? What were my goals for the day? I always call it, what I call it is use your bathroom break as a way to do it. Every time you go to the bathroom, assuming that you're hydrating well, you should be resetting yourself. And this idea of constantly bringing yourself back, if you think about driving, I do a lot of sailing. If you think about sailing, driving, anything like that, we don't just drive and go straight. We're constantly adjusting. If you do that in terms of your stress, you're going to keep it in check. And this is a wonderful thing for your team, for your employees, because it's easy. It's not too much psychobabble. And it's not something that requires you to carve out this ton of time in your life. So that's why I am a huge proponent of it. Yeah, it's not therapy. I do work with a lot of folks who are like, oh, perfect. I'll just do that and I'll be good. And I don't have to worry about anything else. That is not true. There are a lot of other issues going on besides your ability to recalibrate. And while that's good for you, if it gets to be more, if you have other things going on, this will not fix everything. I wish that it could. And that's where the last piece of this is really important. There have been so many suicides among athletes recently. Suicide is a huge problem, as mental health issues are a huge problem, and COVID has made it even worse. And the backlog of mental health problems with a shortage of supply of providers it's unfathomable. Even with that, it is important for you, me, every one of us to take a moment and notice, how is somebody doing? And take that risk. If we notice that they don't seem to be doing okay, they seem different, they seem off, they just don't see themselves, to say something, to say, hey, I'm concerned about you. Particularly if you're in a leadership role, you need to be willing to do that and not to take the mindset that this is their business. That's number one. Number two, if you're a huge proponent and advocate of mental health and mental health treatment, and that as a part of your company or what you do, recognize that you may be that way, but not everybody else is. And so it's also your job, and I say yours, all of ours, to when we see that person who's not doing so well, and we maybe have an initial conversation, if they shut us down, we don't do though, hey, that's not my problem. We keep our eye on them. We come back around, and we do continue to watch and monitor and suggest. Third piece, which is hard, and in some cases, it's not even possible. Everything that you can do in your role, if you're in this kind of role, to facilitate and make things easier for people to get help. There are free and low-cost resources in every community. Insurance is something that becomes a hindrance. EAPs, people are scared to death of, and they shouldn't be. And so anything you can do, not just to talk to a person, but a person who says, yeah, I'm really struggling, to help them not have to take 27 steps on their own to get into care, is really important as well. And in some cases, it may be the most important thing you do is willing to jump in there with them and say, look, I'll help you. I'll help you get in to see somebody. I spend a lot of my time volunteering, helping people navigate their EAP, their insurance, their deductibles, and their free and low cost resources. I will also say this as an advocate: if you're in a position to offer support, to offer resources, to offer sort of vetted, but maybe somewhat unconventional resources, whether it's teletherapy, things like that, please do. We are so backed up as a mental health community. The average, at least, and I know I'm talking to folks from all over, but particularly in this state, the average time to get in to see any licensed mental health provider, average, is probably 6 to 10 weeks. That's assuming, that is not including something like an acute psychiatric crisis. 6 to 10 weeks of hang in there. And you can only imagine if that's you or someone at work hanging in there, that's not easy. So again, that's my soapbox piece. I'm doing everything I can. You do everything you can. At the very least, be supportive of your folks. This is the interesting thing about being a leader. If you're in a leadership role, you both assume responsibility for your company, for the folks that you lead, and at the same time, you think you're invincible. I am a leader, so I don't have to worry about psychological problems because I am looking out for my employees and I care about them. I am invincible and I can deflect any of this stuff because my job is to make sure they're okay. And no. And in fact, if you are an impaired leader, and impaired, again, I'm only talking about stress. I'm not talking about significant psychiatric problems. If you are a stressed out mess as a leader, you are infusing toxicity into your organization. And if that organization has one other person, then it's into that one other person. If it has 1,000 people, it is trickling down into the culture. Anytime you are in a leadership role, whether it's business, whether it's as a parent, as a coach, as a teacher, as a partner, the more that you express distress that is not well managed, the more toxic emotions you put into the environment. And we are social beings, which means we automatically take that in. And then a lot of times we will mimic what we see, be it your kids, be it your partner, be it your employees. So please, if you're in a leadership role, you don't have to divulge all of your personal demons. You don't have to tell anybody anything, but you do have to take care of yourself so that the people that work with you will see somebody who's in a good, healthy place. I am super easy to get a hold of. I have been my whole career. I always want to help. I want to help with consultation. I want to help to answer questions. I want to help if you can't figure out what to do for yourself. No, I don't do psychotherapy for every single person who reaches out to me, but I will help you get into psychotherapy if you need it. I will help you find an EAP for your company. I will consult with your team about stress and whatnot. I am both, I make a living doing this, but I'm also an advocate and it is my passion. Because I've seen too many lives destroyed. And if I don't go there, I've seen too many companies destroyed by really smart people who didn't take care of themselves and their employees. And we're only looking at the most acute, seminal events, the heart attacks, the strokes, the accidents, and weren't looking at this incredibly common thing that pollutes every work environment, every social environment we have. I think that is it. That is it. How much time? All right. Right on time. Oh, I see something in the chat.
It's me chatting, just acknowledging you.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm happy to take questions, comments, critiques.
I have a question in particular about burnout. You can stop sharing your screen if you really want. Okay, I have experienced burnout pretty significantly, and I was wondering, I felt like, okay, wow, I probably just need to take a week off and rest. And that didn't work. Like, I was still incredibly exhausted. If I'm inferring from your talk accurately, like burnout is more than just, I need rest.
Yes.
Like, are you saying, hey, I need to set expectations with myself then, that I'm not going to cure it with a pill. and it's not gonna happen overnight. Like I actually have to carve out time and space over the longer time.
Yeah, I mean, burnout's one of these weird things because we don't know, do we call it a diagnosis? Is it acute? Is it permanent? I've had a lot of people say, okay, I've crossed over into burnout, and like, now what? And you can come back from burnout, but you can't come back. A, you can't come back in a week, and B, you can't come back from just like doing breathing exercises. Burnout by definition says, I am no longer and here's the thing. A lot of times we can be more narrowly focused in our burnout, meaning I'm burnt out with respect to my job. It will have effects that bleed over into my life. But a lot of times I cannot be burnt out in my life and just burn out my job, can be burnt out in a relationship, not burn out at work. But the idea behind burnout is there is nothing left from an enthusiasm, engagement. And it's not just that I don't like it, it's I don't care. And then on top of that, like you said, I don't have the energy. I'm exhausted physically, cognitively, and it's not something that and part of the way you test burnout, if you go take a week off and you come right back after the week and you feel pretty good the week off, you come right back and you're like back into the old place, you probably burn out. Burnout requires modification of your environment, without a doubt. This doesn't mean that you have to leave your job. It doesn't mean you have to throw your company away. It doesn't mean that you have to necessarily leave a relationship. But what it does mean is you can't, when you're burned out, it's not just about like doing deep breathing exercises and exercising every day. It's about making a fundamental shift. And this is why burnout is so serious. I didn't get into this. One of the huge sectors right now that we are seeing burnout in is in healthcare, particularly among nurses. Burnout was an issue in nursing to begin with, but after COVID, I mean, we literally are seeing people leave their careers because of the amount of stress and pressure they're under. If you can't recover in your relationship, in your job, in anything that you're doing, after some time to step away, after some, concerted effort at doing these sort of coping things, if you can't recover, then you are burnout. And that means that you need to make fundamental changes either in what you're doing or your life, because I can promise you this, and this is not a doomsday thing, but I promise you this, it doesn't go away on its own. It will not go away on its own. And if you don't do anything about it, that's when it transitions into depression, anxiety, heart disease, substance use disorders, etc. And that's why we want to prevent burnout if we possibly can.
I think that's the key takeaway for me, is that it is not going to resolve on its own. And if we are not carving it out, naming it, and then trying to rectify or change our behavior, then there is no good end state.
Absolutely. And to use, I brought up as many cliche words as I could. I did not use work-life balance because I did that. I didn't do that for two reasons. One, that's sort of like my wife's territory. But I kind of have my own thing with this, and I've always said this, and this is important for us, for all of us here. The idea of work-life balance is stupid. And I'll tell you why. This is Josh's perspective on this. Life is everything. Work is a part of life. So if you think about it, you don't balance your work and your life. Your life includes your work. There is no balance. You can't balance work and life because life encompasses work. So you get into issues around trying to balance something that is impossible to balance. It is about prioritization. It is about relative importance. It is about creating a blend of what you want in your life. Work is one part of it. Now, depending on where you are, depending on your personal preferences, Work may be a huge part of it. Maybe it's most of it. I would never have it be all of it, or you will die, because you will not take care of your physical health, your mental health, and you will either have a heart attack, stroke, or you will have a psychiatric disorder. So don't let it be 100%. But the idea of balancing it is absolutely ridiculous. And we should not be conveying that, if we're leaders, to people that work for us. This is about blending and prioritizing. Last word on prioritizing. I know you all know this. As soon as you get in a leadership role of any sort, when you start talking about priorities as someone who is in a work leadership role, you have to be very careful, because people see you as representing work. And when you tell people that it's important that they prioritize, there is very often an unspoken message, even if you're not trying to say this, that what they're hearing is, oh, I need to make work more of a priority. And that's something that even if you never intend to say that, in a leadership role, very often that's what people are believing, or they want to please you. They want to do well by you. I see that in relationships as well. When you talk about prioritization, you have to allow people to do that for themselves and come to their own conclusion. That may mean that they may not want or take a promotion. That may mean that they may not stay with the company. That may mean that they want a different kind of job. That may mean that the relationship that you're in, non-work relationship, may have to change or may have to end. But prioritization is how we navigate our life. And ultimately, if we're not making priorities for ourselves, then we get caught in this stress trap every single day. And this is sort of the corporate argument. It's a hard one, but if you got people who are not functioning well for themselves, if they don't see and have fulfillment in their life, they are going to be crappy employees, period. They will have problems with memory and concentration and dedication and engagement. And even if they don't like their job, but they have fulfillment in other parts of their life, they will be a better employee. So it's really important that as we look at the people that we're interacting with and the people that we work with, that we pay attention to how they are in their whole life, not the balance between work and life.
Thank you for this. I really appreciate it. Like I said, selfishly, I probably needed this talk and I probably should have just called you.
It's my pleasure.
But I, again, just wanted to say thank you. I think this is absolutely critical and relevant for this time, not only at SHIP, but I think across a lot of organizations. So I am going to give people their time back and be one of those leaders that does not have meetings stacked. I really appreciate this. If we get any more feedback internally, if I hear some things, I will definitely reach out. But to everyone tuning in, for sure, I would absolutely go follow Dr. Josh. Find him on Instagram. It's a fun and good watch every time I'm on there. So again, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and I know we'll catch up soon.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.